What on earth is paradata, and why should I bother about it? Living in a society with an abundance of information and data doesn't mean that all of it would be readily available and usable for us. It is often difficult to find and access. It often contradicts with other information and data. It is not necessarily that relevant, and it can be difficult to digest and use. Information research has for several decades tackled with the question of how to provide and ensure physical and intellectual access to information and data, and developed our understanding of how to connect people with relevant information. In the process, it is important to understand how people used, behave, and interact with information in different contexts and situations, how to organize it for best possible accessibility, and what tools and techniques help information seekers to find what they need. Understanding people and tools are important, but equally important is to know about the information or data they are about to use. A typical problem with existing and available information and data is that it can be difficult to know what it is. This means often in practice that there is too little metadata, that is data about data, available for us to figure out what it is all about. Another typical problem is that we know what it is, but we don't know where it comes from, who did it and perhaps how it has been handled and used since the creation, to know how to use, whether to trust it, and to know what it is good for. This data is pretty unusable because I don't know how it was created. But I kind of understand that it's difficult to know at the time of creation what information will be needed in the future. And documenting all possible things done when creating it is also pretty much impossible. There is really no obvious way to determine what information would be enough, but if it could be decided, it would really be a huge breakthrough. This issue applies to research where legacy data is not usable or reusable for new discoveries if it is not adequately documented. In business, where information and data is incapable of supporting decision-making and providing competitive advantage if it is unclear how it came about. In education, where poorly sourced information cannot be relied. And other everyday life contexts where people need to get informed and do stuff with information and data. That means pretty much everywhere. The tricky question is what information about the creation and use of information and data is needed and how to capture enough of that information to make it usable and useful. Another side of the problem is how to do it without capturing too much or putting too much time and resources to something with a very low payoff. A part of the issue today is to track down the provenance or lineage of digital data within digital systems, but there is much more to know about data making than to merely track down the movement and versions of digital data. What is needed to complement metadata that describes data is data that describes processes in much broader sense. Origins, movements, and social and technical transformations in both digital and non-digital senses. This data is paradata, data about processes of the creation and use of data, and beyond. When it comes to paradata, the problem really is what to document and how much to keep. There is a lot of work left to develop efficient and effective systems for managing this data and standards for inscribing it, even if much work has already been done to those ends. In parallel, we need to know more about what people really need to know about processes for different informational purposes, not least for understanding diverse forms of data they bring forth. Various means how do people get to know about where a bunch of data or information is coming from and how it came about, and how to document and pass on this understanding to others, both in various contemporary contexts and situations within and across domains, and in the future. Finding answers to these questions understanding what paradata as data on processes is and why it is important do not revoke the need to consider other aspects of preservation and archiving of information, data, and records, but are complementary to them. And a key concern in tackling the hurdles of informing and getting informed, that both are clearly more complicated questions than of merely making stuff available and assuming that they will be accessible, understandable, and useful for others.